Hello and welcome to the Embrace Balance, Discover Joy podcast. I'm Amanda Butland, your host and intuitive life coach. All right, welcome to another episode of the Embrace Balance, Discover Joy podcast. Today, my special guest is Stephanie Policar. Stephanie, so great to have you with me today.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks, Amanda.
Awesome. Well, I always like to start out with a little icebreaker question. Would you mind sharing with us what activity or hobby brings you the most joy and why?
Oh, that's such a great question. I have a sweet dog named Ollie who is a Labradoodle, and I love watching him run in the snow. We spend a lot of time in the mountains this time of year, and I love watching him off leash running with pure abandon.
Oh, I love that. And Labradoodles are so adorable. So I can imagine how cute that might look running through
Yeah,
snow.
yeah.
All right. So we're here to talk about coaching. And you yourself are a coach. I would love if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your coaching journey, how you got to be where you are today.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was mostly out of necessity. I have two now teenage daughters, and when my oldest was about 3 months old, um, we discovered that she had a severe nut allergy, and she was just a baby and hadn't even eaten any food. At that point, solid food, but we discovered just by like someone eating nuts and then touching her skin that she broke out into hives, and then it happened again. And so, after going to the doctor and getting assessed, we realized it's a severe nut allergy, and we had to completely change the way we did food in our house. And because she was just a baby and not even talking or walking, we were her advocates and her voice. So that sort of sent us as a family down this path of really diving into reading labels on foods and having to figure out when we travel or go out to eat or go to a friend's house or relatives for holidays, like making sure that everything was safe, and just sort of into the world of food allergies. And then when my second daughter was born, she had some of the same stuff, not quite as severe. And so we just, we're kind of living that world. And then when they were school age, it got, to a point where we really had to work with the community, the schools and the teachers, and then friends and family, where they were going on play dates and doing field trips and like really learning how to keep them safe. And then I ended up being tested and needing to be gluten-free and dairy-free for a while. And so we became a household that had, three different things that we were really careful to avoid, one being life-threatening. So that became our world. And then there were so many people that, in preschool, as we were interacting with other families and through elementary school, who were like, "Oh, I see that you're navigating this. Can you tell us how you did it?" And so it became this sort of natural thing. And then, I was just sort of talking to people and giving advice. And then I was like, really interested in nutrition always. And so I ended up going back to school and becoming a certified nutrition health coach, and doing it for, starting a new career. I was originally in corporate marketing for, almost 20 years. And then this just completely was a pivot. And it's been really great. I really, really enjoy it.
Wow, what a journey. And I don't have a child that suffers from, allergies like that, but I know, my son has friends who do. And that is, when you have a child, especially that young, when you discover the allergy, that is a tough, you know, thing to, have to deal with, having to be careful all the time about, what's around and what can be eaten, what can't. So I can see how, that blossomed into sort of where you are today with really having gone through that experience and now being able to share sort of your experience and all the positives that have come from that, what you've learned in order to help others sort of navigate nutrition. So yeah. So thank
Exactly.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I guess another part of it is there's the actual like what can we eat and what can we not eat part, and navigating like the grocery store or a restaurant or traveling. And then there's the social aspect of it, which is often the most hard thing for people. It's like, well, now that my kid's going off to school and I have no control, like I can pack them a lunch, but I don't know who's sitting next to them. And there's like the nut free table or and then the sort of social isolation you might feel if you're the only one that's going through that. And, parents have feelings, kids have feelings. So that's a lot of part of coaching as well. When people have something new that they're transitioning into, they often need help with that as well.
Mm. Yeah, I like that you brought that up because oftentimes people don't really think of sort of that social aspect of how that impacts when you have a food allergy, how that impacts sort of the social component. Because you're right, like if there's kids over sitting over there that have nuts in their lunchbox, then you can't sit with them. So you're sitting over here, and I think I do recall sort of at school, sort of the nut-free table, sort of then who's going to sit with you at the nut-free table if you're the only one in class? So it's sort of that, how do you still create that sense of the friendships, the community, the social circles when you do feel there is that little bit of isolation there. So I like that you bring that up and how you're able to also help coach people through sort of that aspect of it too. It's not just about the food and the nutrition.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do want to touch a little bit on, how you mentioned sort of like you can't have this and you can't have that. And I know one of the things that you like to talk about is not necessarily depriving, but how you can add things that are not the things you can't have, but where you don't feel like you're being deprived or depriving yourself of something. Could you talk a little bit about like how that approach helps?
Of course, of course. And having our family, for instance, which we are gluten free, and at one point we were dairy free, and then obviously nut free. And so we'll just take you know, just going to a social gathering where there's going to be a dessert, right? It could be a block party, it could be a birthday party, whatever. And we would just come with cupcakes in tow or cookies in tow, like always having something prepared, just because you just don't know. And even if people are like, oh no, I made this, there are no nut ingredients, there are no gluten ingredients. And depending how severe your thing is, obviously you can't just have a little of something and it will be okay. But the philosophy being sort of crowding out, so if you're not dealing with a severe allergy and say, for instance, someone wants to just be healthier, or they're just like, I really have this sweet tooth and it's just controlling my life, and I don't want to not have sugar. That's just not realistic. And I agree. When you start to deprive yourself, usually you can do that, for a bit, like a week or two, and then it's just constantly in your mind. Like, I know I can't, so I want it more. There's all sorts of research around this, but I love just adding in more water or adding in another serving of vegetables or some leafy greens. Like, why don't we just leave everything as it is, if you can, right? If it's not an allergy that's, prohibitive, but and then add in more water each day. It could be, and it can start with very small changes, just like one extra glass of water a day, or instead of your 3 cups of coffee, have the 3 cups, but then add 3 cups of water with it. Just making these small changes where eventually your body stops craving the thing as much. It's not to say that like you'll be completely off sugar if you do this thing. It's like that's just not realistic in the society that we live in. It's completely possible, but especially when I first start working with people, I like to say, what can we add in addition to what you're already doing, so you don't feel deprived and your body's actually getting more nutrients, more of what it needs. So eventually you won't want the thing as much.
Mm. Oh, yeah, I like that approach. When you mentioned, you can still have your 3 cups of coffee, but then add in lots more water. And it's sort of like, so basically you're diluting almost, right? But then you're getting like the liquids, still getting the liquids in. So, um, so I did also want to touch a little bit about on sort of like the clientele that you have, because I'm very curious because you have this background in, you know, starting out with sort of the allergens, and how to, incorporate allergies into your diet. But then you also, you became certified and you do nutrition coaching. It sounds like you also serve people who are just looking to make shifts in their diet. So I'm
Mhm.
curious about your clientele, like who is it a combination of both like people with allergies who are navigating things like that versus like people who are just looking for a change in like sort of how they're eating?
It's a little bit of both of those things and a lot of things in between. Primarily, my clientele has been women, but I do also work with men. I've worked with teenagers, people who are, um, I've worked with some athletes who are trying to get more nutrients into their diet and really figure out what's the protein carb balance for the activity and fitting things in a very busy schedule. I've worked with people, a family who had a child with diabetes and they were navigating how to get all of the things they needed at school. And having to very specifically count, the sugar and the glucose. I've worked with people who are just, wanting to, they don't know how to cook or cook healthily, and they need help with that. So I help people figure out meal plans, um, and shopping lists and grocery store field trips where it's like this is all foreign maybe to them, where I love grocery stores and it's like a fun place to like discover new things. And I will go into people's kitchens sometimes and help them clear out maybe some things that aren't the best. And if it's constantly staring you in the face, you're going to go to it. I know I do. And then, I also teach cooking classes. So I've done that for people, both through, uh, businesses that offer those and then just privately. And I wrote a cookbook as well. So I think that it's called Kids Eat Free. It's allergy friendly recipes, of course. That was, again, born out of necessity for my own family. And so I thought, well, if I'm testing all these recipes and sharing them with friends and family that maybe don't even have to eliminate certain things from their diet and they're enjoying them just as much as we are, then maybe I should share that with the world. So yeah, there's lots of points of entry. If it's just a matter of I just need some recipes, like there's that piece, and then if it's I want more one-on-one coaching help, I do that as well, or group programs. It's all good.
Awesome. I love sort of your full spectrum, like from not just, the actual nutrition coaching, but like going on shopping trips and going through people's pantries and the cooking classes and all the things. That's amazing. All the offerings that you have. And I do also love the grocery store and discovering new things. I'm a huge label reader myself, because you had mentioned having to read labels, especially with the allergens. And that when I transitioned my diet, it was like, you have to read every single label, and what is it that you're looking right to make sure that what's on it doesn't have anything that you're not wanting to eat. And then after a while, it's that initial sort of like I need to read every single label on everything first to know what I can and can't eat, and then after that it's a lot easier. But because you brought up sort of the label reading, I'm interested to see sort of like how you help guide people like on reading ingredients, because sometimes it's like sometimes things are called things and they're not, there's hidden things in certain things, right? When you read certain ingredients, like the ones that have like the super long names, like you don't even know what that is exactly. So how do you help guide people with reading labels?
Yeah, there's some great resources that are free, and then there are, I have a couple little templates and lists to be kind of. It depends what you're, trying to add in or leave out of your everyday. And if you're vegan, for instance, or gluten free, for instance, like I know a lot of things, a lot of gluten is hidden in things like soy sauce, for instance. Like who would even think about that? Or red vine candy. Like that was a thing that my kids would always be so mad about. They're like, "What? How could there even be wheat in here and why?" And I'm like, "Yeah, great question." It's just such an easy sort of, low cost filler for a lot of processed foods. And so it is something to be aware of. And the good news is most restaurants, at least in the bigger cities, are so aware now for most all dietary needs, whether it's a vegetarian vegan thing or even FODMAP now, like garlic and onions can be problematic for people. And so as long as you plan ahead, if you're going to a restaurant per se or to someone's house, and, people approach it in a couple different ways. It's like, um, you know, I know you asked about label reading per se, but I think it's related. It's like, you can take it on yourself and just be like, I'm going to just bring my own thing and I'm going to let people know ahead of time so it's not weird, or I don't really care if it's weird. It's like there's coaching through how to navigate that, or like calling the restaurant ahead of time when it's not busy, bringing a little allergy card with you that says, it's something you can hand to a server, so you're not having to relay to a server something very serious and life threatening, and you're not sure if it's getting lost in translation in the kitchen. You can hand them a card. That's really great. Also super great for traveling internationally. There's these really great cards you can get where English is on one side and the other language is on the other side. And then it's very clear, like my sister has celiac disease. So that's very serious. If even a little cross contamination, very similar to a severe nut allergy. So we've had to navigate that ourselves, and then lots of clients have as well. And just really simple things like that you can do. But reading labels, I think it's just if there's something that you're just not sure of, like sometimes natural flavors or, even just like malt vinegar has gluten in it. And not everybody knows that, and so it's just a matter of sort of having it in your back pocket, or you can always just Google it. Just be like, hey, is malt vinegar, does it contain X, Y, and Z? And then that's helpful. Or just, if when in doubt, don't do it kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually love what you mentioned about the little card that you could carry around. I have experienced that traveling to some countries on like a tour group thing where they give you this little card and you're like, you just take it with you to all the restaurants. And it's great. It's super convenient because I don't even think to do something like that here. Like I go to restaurants and I'm, trying to explain the whole thing and they're like, and it's for me, it's not an allergy, it's a preference. So I'm like, if there's, stuff in it that I end up eating, I'm not, it's okay. But yeah, having to go through that process of explaining what it is that you would like to exclude is a process.
Right. People don't want to be, that, especially if it's like a large group of people and a lot of people need to put their order in. You don't want to take like 10 minutes to explain your situation. And it's just a little more straightforward. If you're like, here's my stuff, does it work? If not, like there's usually something at any restaurant, like you can have a salad or you can have a side dish or something that you feel is safe. And the other, trick is I usually eat before I go to a restaurant, and then I'm not starving. And if there's really nothing that looks good or that I feel is maybe not the safest, then I'm not, miserable. I can still enjoy and have something to drink and, maybe some chips and salsa or, whatever it is. Um, so
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think a lot of restaurants have gotten a lot better these days at putting something on the menu that's, at least plant-based, right? There's oftentimes something, because it used to be like a few years back, it was like your options were a salad or French fries, right?
right, right.
And that was sort of the running joke of like people who are plant-based. It was like, well, you're going to end up with either a salad or French fries.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
And you bring up a good point about an allergy versus a preference or a restriction or sensitivity, and there's such a wide spectrum, and even if it is a preference and may not be life threatening, like it still can wreak havoc on your system, and it's also important to you for for any number of reasons, and so there's no reason to feel less than, or that your needs don't matter as much. It's very important, and you're spending money and time to go out to dinner, so it should be enjoyable. It doesn't have to be this whole thing.
yeah, for sure. It's funny. Like I think I was on a flight at some point. It was probably a few years back, probably not, more recently. And when you mentioned that, because they always ask you if it's an allergy or for preference, right? Because they know, it's obviously very serious if it's
Yeah.
an allergy. And sometimes you'll say, well, no, it's a preference. It's not an allergy. And they just look at you like, really? You're not allergic, but you still don't want to eat it. What's your problem? And so I think that attitude for people that for it's more of a preference than an allergy. I tend to get that a little bit more, I think, and maybe not so much now, but I got that a little bit more back then, a few years back, because it was sort of like, well, why do you even have this restriction if it's not an allergy?
Well, and it's a personal preference, and it's a health preference, and there's a philosophical preference. There's all sorts of reasons for people to eat the way that they do. It could be a
Sure.
religion then. And you bring up a great point about traveling and on the airlines, and every airline has a different policy. And obviously we have a nut allergy that's life threatening, so we always carry our EpiPen, and we've been on airlines where they take it very seriously. I think everyone does. And they can't guarantee, they may not serve nuts, but everybody brings food now, so they can't guarantee that there aren't nuts in the air or near you. And so it's just a matter of being prepared, and taking your own responsibility, and like, okay, so we could bring the wipes to wipe down the table, and just have your medicine, and know like where the emergency things are when you land, and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. I like sort of all the little tips that you have around, how to travel, how to eat out, especially when there are either restrictions or allergens, because, I don't think a lot of people, like maybe families that don't have, right, people or aren't allergic, like not necessarily understanding sort of like what happens with people who do. And then, maybe they do have a child and that ends up their child ends up having some sort of allergy, well, then it's sort of like, wow, now what do we do? And how do we deal with this? So I'm so glad that you have this, you have this coaching practice where you're able to share all the things that you have learned over the years with your own personal experience. So thank you for, doing this and being this resource for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I did want to start wrapping up. This has been a really, really great conversation. I've loved, where we've been all around with the eating and the food. Um, Before we end, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience? Any last pieces of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
Absolutely. I think it's super important to just bring the fun into anything, especially when, I mean, it's hard when there is a life-threatening thing. It's very serious. It can be very somber, and it can feel very scary. And there's no reason not to have fun with food. Um, and if you do have kids or people in your lives that are feeling nervous about either something, an allergy or sensitivity or preference that is now in their lives that's different, it's just like, get your hands in there, and play around with new recipes, obviously, that are safe and that match what you want to be doing, but have fun with it. And then there's so much room for creativity and sharing and gathering, and I think that's such a big part of it, is making sure that there's a fun element.
Yeah, I love that. And I love, trying new recipes because that's the one thing, right? That there's so many like allergen-free options these days. Like now you go into the grocery store and they've got things labeled like top 10 allergen-free, right? There's so many more options than there used to be. And so to be able to have fun and try different things and try new recipes with all the new available things that are out there. So thank you. I love that message. And thank you for being with me today. It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
I invite you to subscribe to the Embrace Balance Discover Joy podcast and join our community. If you feel inspired by what you hear, please leave a review and share this podcast with others who might benefit. And remember, it's never too late to embrace balance and discover joy in your life. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes filled with inspiring stories and valuable insights. Until next time, take care and be kind to yourself.